All right, so here's take 3 on today's day-long project of intercooler testing on a 5.3 turbo Chevy Malibu. Although I suppose in the grand scheme of swaps, it doesn't really matter what it's in. It's a 5.3 swap Chevy Malibu with a turbo 400 and a reasonably loose converter. VS Racing 7875, the billet wheel. I don't know if it's got a ball bearings intersection. Don't really care. Doesn't matter. Holly high rise or high ram, whatever the hell they call it. Some kind of cam, you know. Call it the 5.3 swap special. And I don't say that disparagingly. It's just, you know, everybody, most people that swap them in with a cam, and yeah, they do other stuff. And this is no exception. So anyway, the car wasn't really making the numbers that the owner kind of expected it to at the given boost, and I got a wild hair and decided to put my own personal Garrett core intercooler on here to see if that was part of the problem, and it turns out it was, so I decided to make a video of it. The setup here is wastegate pressure on the dome. I dropped it down to probably a 6 psi spring, give or take. The Garrett core saw a peak of around, you know, on the boost spike saw a peak of around, I don't know, 5.5 psi or something like that. We'll look at the data log here in a minute. And I got to say, I'm a little conflicted about this, about the results on this. Obviously, I like my intercooler, and the customer's intercooler was just a generic eBay 3-inch intercooler. I mean, you know, eBay's soulless, heartless. Nobody cares about eBay. We just want to know about the horsepower. We want, you know, we want our stuff. So I don't really care about disparaging them. However, I got a buddy here in town, coincidentally the guy that I got my Garrett core intercooler from, who had a drop-in intercooler that with a much better core than the eBay core, and you know, it's one of those hard things where you have a situation, and most people that make content for YouTube probably know this as well. Like, you have an idea, you have a plan, you go, you shoot the video, you do the test, whatever, and it all goes to hell. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. He did me a solid. He loaned me this intercooler, kind of in good faith. So I'm trying to do this whole thing justice here, because I don't feel like it's the core, but you know, the data is the data. I got a feeling that we're probably going to be having a discussion about in-tank design. In fact, I know we're going to have a discussion this coming week on in-tank design on the Real Tuners podcast. So tune in for that if you got time. That's 8 o'clock Central Time Wednesday. Hit me up on Facebook if you need a link, or just look for Real Tuners podcast on YouTube. Shameless plug for a podcast that's not mine. Anyway, let's get to the numbers. So the Garrett core on the first round of 3. So what I did was, real quick, what I did was I installed each intercooler. Started with the Garrett core. It was already on the car, so, you know, no brainer. Excuse me. I brought it up to temperature. Got the air intake temperatures. It's in the intake manifold, so it heats. So it's like a mother. Got them up about around 110, 115 before I did any pulls. I did 3 pulls, kind of back to back to back. I gave it 30, 45 seconds between pulls to kind of, you know, stabilize and cool off a little bit. And I kind of wanted to see what the running average was. On the 2 other intercoolers, I got a pretty good running average. On the Garrett intercooler, I won't say that I got a great average, because it kept exceeding expectations, which sounds like a strange problem to have. But when you're kind of like trying to tune a car and get information, that's a little bit frustrating when it's not really repeatable. But you know, we got to work with the hand we're dealt, and I guess over the course of the day, it was pretty repeatable. Just in the back-to-backs, it wasn't extremely repeatable. It was kind of frustrating in that regard. So anyway, Garrett went first on the blue line here. You see it right there, 391, 344 torque. This is at, like I said, at 5.5 pounds of boost, right there at somewhere around 5,000 RPMs. Actually, the boost peaked probably around 4,500. Around 5 to 5,500, it was tapering a little bit, and then the boost crept just a little bit up to closer to 7 by red line. That probably has a lot to do with a lack of ignition timing up top at that amount of boost. We'll look at that in the log. Like I said, this is not about tuning. The tune is not great on this car yet. I mean, you know, there's been a lot more experimentation than tuning going on here. But so we got that. Then I did the eBay intercooler. I swapped it on there and was absolutely shocked to see the numbers that it produced. That would be the, I guess, purple line there, 291.9, max torque of 290.8. This is all straight off the wastegate. I didn't change anything. There's no dome control or anything. All that's turned off in the ECU. This was supposed to be just kind of a straight comparison as close as possible of all the intercoolers. So any kind of difference in boost that was seen on the ECU would, I mean, is explained most simply by pressure drop across the intercooler core, right? A resistance to airflow. And the peak boost I observed on the eBay intercooler was around 4 PSI. But the bigger problem was the higher I rev the motor, like you kind of see, the torque is dropping off at a greater rate than the Garrett intercooler there. I mean, it's not a huge, I don't know, it's a difference. It's 20-degree difference, or give or take, if you get your protractor out and kind of looked at it. It's dropping off faster than the Garrett core did. And in the data logs, what is noticeable there is that boost tapers from right there at around 5,300 RPMs, 5,300 RPMs, and really probably before that, according to the logs, it tapers down to 11 kPa or so over atmospheric. I'm off the top of my head. That's like, I don't know, 1.5, 2 PSI, maybe something like that, give or take. But the peak boost was already down right there at about 5,000, 4,500. Peak boost is already down 11 kPa from what the Garrett core was doing. It was, the Garrett core was reading 138 kPa. The eBay intercooler was 127. And then it went from 127 down to 111 by red line. It's a pretty significant drop, considering that we're not really making that much demand on the intercooler, not pushing a lot of boost through it, not trying to, not asking a whole lot, and B, like that's just a lot of pressure drop there, considering the tune didn't change at all. Then I swapped in my buddy's intercooler, which is I guess you call it a hybrid between them. I'll show the intercoolers here in a minute. We'll talk about them here in a second. I don't think I'm going to keep this video short. I'm sorry, guys. But it's a much better core. It's a better looking core. Like it almost has to flow better than the eBay core. However, the in-tank design is virtually identical, and not something that I really considered before. I've done this sort of test before on other vehicles that didn't have LS turbos that, probably 5 people care about. We did it on a Volvo about a year ago. We compared the eBay intercooler with the stock intercooler with my Garrett intercooler, because we had it all laying around. And ironically, or perhaps unironically, at our control group on that one was the Volvo intercooler on the Volvo car at like 10 pounds of boost or something, made about 170 wheel, 173 I think was the exact number. I'd have to go back and look. The eBay intercooler dropped 10 wheel right there. The boost was a little bit lower. And then when we put the Garrett on there, the Garrett was about 15 wheel higher than the factory intercooler, 25 wheel higher than the eBay intercooler, and made a little bit more, or had, I guess, intercoolers don't make boost, had less back pressure than the other 2 intercoolers. Not by much compared to the Volvo intercooler, but I think it was a couple PSI compared to the eBay intercooler. And I don't know what you're thinking. Oh, we'll just turn up the boost on the eBay intercooler. When you do that, you've already got pressure drop across the core. That's partially, or actually that's mainly why you see this discrepancy here. But another side effect or effect of that is you have higher back pressure already in the exhaust side, because the turbo's having to work harder to produce the amount of boost that it's producing here. And if you turn the boost up, all you're doing is further increasing your back pressure on the hot side, and the car is going to continue to struggle to make the power that it probably should at a given pressure ratio. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could turn the boost up and, we turn the boost up to match, but then if you leave it at that same wastegate setting, whatever that spring setting is, and run it with the other two intercoolers, it's gonna make more power. Anyway, the big surprise on this one was that the better flowing core did not actually manifest itself in better horsepower. And this was kind of like I said, one of those things where it's just kind of hard to admit when you're wrong. My assumption was obviously wrong, that this other intercooler was going to work a lot better. And I had to kind of stop and think about it. And one of the things I did was I went ahead and put the Garrett back on there and said, okay, well, the car's been running, it's hot. Let's make sure that everything has stayed the same. And so you see this last number here of 390 and 344.7. That's what I got from the Garrett intercooler when I put it back on at the end. I don't know, torque didn't display. Torque on the other intercooler was roughly, let's see, what does it say there? 298 foot-pounds. So I mean, you got 8 horsepower and 8 foot-pounds of torque difference between the other two intercoolers. I'm gonna hop down off the dyno here, and we're gonna look at these other intercoolers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm gonna pop up some data on the laptop, and we're gonna go from there. So it's definitely beer 30 in the shop. Also, it's Oktoberfest season, thank God. Fall is finally upon us. If you don't live in the South, you don't know what I'm talking about. But us down here, us fat rednecks are just greatly looking forward to decreased air temps, not just because our turbo cars will be faster. All right, so what I've got here is I've got a log from the bottom pull on the Garrett intercooler. This is pull number 6. This is the last pull. Real quick, I'm just going to show you this guy. So you can tell right off the bat, the in-tank design on this intercooler is different from the others here. I have 2 eBay intercoolers actually in the picture, this guy and that guy. This is the one off the car. This one's just one that I've had sitting on the shelf. This is the one from the Volvo test that is also roundly a piece of shit. And I've got it sitting on the shelf. I'm not really sure why. I would never burden somebody with that. I think I just have it. I hadn't gotten around to throwing it away, really, is what it boils down to. It ain't worth anything. No, you can't have it. I wouldn't give this to my worst enemy. So before we get to the cross-section views of these intercoolers, so let's look at the data real quick. I'm just going to kind of breeze through this for now. Everything, all right, so this green line right here, that's RPM. Everything pretty much before it starts to pitch up is the dyno in hold mode. I have a 3-second hold time. Call it hold the spool, whatever you want to call it. Basically, you hit the button, you mash the gas, and the dyno locks it down for whatever amount of time you set it to, so that it can, you get the thing all hot and bothered and spooled up and lathered and ready to play. 3 seconds was plenty. I probably could have cut it down to about 2 looking at these logs, because basically everything was all in on all the intercoolers by 2 seconds, but whatever. So right there, we're looking at about 3,900 RPMs, and we're looking at 138 kPa. We're going to go up here. This is 4,700 RPMs. The boost is tapered a little bit, 137. Since we're going to hit the high notes, I'm just going to go to the low point. 134 kPa is the low point for this, is for the Garrett intercooler. And this was at 5,500 RPMs. From here to, realistically, the red line's right around here at about 68.9. From 55 to 68, the boost kind of crept up to 149 kPa. Everything over here is pretty much junk data, because that's where it's up against the soft and the hard limiter. I would guess, and based on other cars that I've tuned in the past, that the reason the boost is going up at higher RPMs is a lack of ignition timing and potentially other things. This wasn't like I said, this wasn't a tuning exercise. I mean, we got this big ass fucking lean spike over here. It's 14 to 1, and it's, you know, sitting there at 130 kPa like that. That's undesirable. But what RPM was that at? Yeah, 3,800 RPMs. I guess the ironic thing about that is you get a little bit of acceleration enrichment, and then it's a dip, and then it comes back into that. And I've been kind of chasing that one as I've tuned the car. But enough about that. Like I said, this is not a tuning video, and the tune is hardly perfect. So then let's go to the eBay intercooler, the best of the eBay intercooler, which was the first pull. I'll zoom in on this dude. And right off the bat, like, everything's kind of jumping all over the place, compared to the last log. You know, this is your injector pulse width, which is higher than your air fuel ratio. So here it's not good news. It's not lean on this one. It's not running 14 to 1 right there at, well, 3,400 RPMs, because it's not leaning on it nearly as hard. But we're also only making about 122 kPa. And so right around here-ish, when the dyno releases, we got 127 kPa. That's kind of a peak value. And again, nothing changed except I swapped that intercooler for the Samuel Adams intercooler here. And of course, that sounds like, now it sounds like I'm disparaging Sam Adams. I'm not at all. I like Oktoberfest. The only thing that they have that I like, but I like Oktoberfest. It's good stuff. And then we're going to go out here. So here we are. We're at 5,000 RPMs. I'm going to read the numbers off because you probably can't see them on the video. 119 kPa. So we've already dropped from 126 to 119 at 5,000 RPMs. So we've gone 1,000 RPMs, and we've lost a third, roughly, of our total amount of boost that we've made. We're at 112 kPa, and this is at 6,200 RPMs. At 6,700 RPMs, we are down around 111 kPa. So anybody that wants to, quick side note, you want to convert kPa to PSI if you're at sea level. This is a caveat. If you are at sea level, you take 100 off, drop a decimal point in front of that, and multiply it by 14.7. So you'd be basically, 1 bar, 14.7 PSI, which is 100 kPa. You multiply that guy by 0.11, and we'll do it here real quick. I've got a cool calculator button on my laptop. Yay! 14.7 times 0.11, and you get 1.6 psi. If you go back to the peak value here, right around 127, we're going to go with 0.27 times 3.9. So it didn't even make quite 4 psi. And since we're sitting here playing with this, I mean, let's see, truth in numbers, right? 0.38 times 14.7, 5.86. So you got almost a pound and a half difference at only 5 pounds of boost between the Garrett intercooler and the eBay intercooler. That's a pretty big difference. So then let's go to my buddy's intercooler here. And I think the first one was, again, probably the best one for his as well. And it's not as bad. It's not jumping around quite as much, but it's still jumping around a little bit. And you'll note that we're making a little bit more peak boost, 128 kPa, 128 kPa, 129. Let's see here. Come on. we're at, let's go down to 5,000 because that's just a good talking point. 5,000, we're down here. Okay, we're 121 kPa. So the other one, I can't remember where it was at 5,000 RPMs. It had tapered off to like 118 or something. We're not talking about a big spread. Like I said, the big shock from this was that the better core did not do any better, honestly, than the eBay core. Like I said, that's kind of got me a little bit conflicted here about talking about it. I feel like I'm bashing a buddy of mine, and I'm not. And I feel like I have kind of come up short on my assumptions, which is definitely possible. I'm a lot more willing to accept that than beating up on a buddy. And basically, kind of with the eBay core there, you know, it kind of mimics it. Although I will say up top, the numbers start coming back up a little bit towards red line, unlike the eBay core. So, I mean, it's doing a little bit more. It's putting in a little bit more work, but it's still lagging. I mean, that's 117, 118 kPa. I mean, it's still lagging way behind what the Garrett core is doing. So let's, real quick, let's talk about why I thought this was going to do so well and why I'm now thinking it's possibly an in-tank issue. I'm going to need to grab a flashlight for this. We'll see if the video turns out bad, then I'll go get a flashlight. So we're going to try not to beat the hell out of this. We're going to look down in there, and you can kind of see, focus, bitch. You can kind of see that the parts where the air flows through on the heat exchanger are tall, but when you look inside it where the air has to actually, where your engine air flows through, like they're kind of short, kind of restrictive. You know, you got a couple of them. Let me hold my phone back here without having to zoom out. You got a couple of them. You got a couple more maybe than this one, although not a whole lot more. And functionally, we'll look at this guy just for shits and grins. I think functionally the difference between this intercooler and the other intercooler, yeah, is the fact that this one's got 2.5 inch outlets on it, and this one's got 3 inch outlets on it. So that's really about the only difference. It may be a little bit narrower as well. It's not thinner. I think that's an illusion of the camera. And then we're going to look at this guy, and if I can get it off, come on. It does not have the little nubs on the bottom to prevent it from sliding around. And so the first thing that stands out immediately is that, you know, the pathways for the air to go through this core are much larger than the ones on that one. You still have a good frontal area for heat dissipation with airflow through it. But, you know, the pathways are a lot bigger. And we can count them. I could probably measure them. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more science that could go into this. But if you know, just we're gonna backyard this a little bit because it's getting late, and I've shot this video like 3 times today. You're looking at about the same thing on this core. Now they are not the same. This is a Garrett core. I'm not sure who makes this core. Greg says he helped design it. I don't doubt that. Greg's not the kind of guy to bullshit. It looks good. Like I said, it looks really good. It's bigger. The pathways through it are bigger. Like it should move air a lot better than what the data logs and what the dynagraphs show. And so now I'm conflicted. I think I originally was gonna have a great bash the eBay intercooler, and here's a cool drop-in upgrade video, and I hope to have that. I still hope to have that here soon. I'm going to talk with Greg about making some different in-tanks maybe, because this core is rated at 850 horsepower, and he has other intercoolers. This is not a new core. This is not something like hot, fresh, new on the market. This is something I didn't know he had it, but this is something he's had for a couple of years. So he's got cores like this out in the wild that have been on the dyno and have made the power that, or more than the power really than they're rated at. Another reason why this whole thing was kind of a big shocker. Like I can't quite wrap my head around it. But the only thing I can think is on the other cars, probably they had fabricated in tanks that were probably a little bit better looking than that. And if, you know, getting a little bit of airflow, a little bit of an airflow discussion here real quick. I'm going to use this one just as an example because it's right here and it stands up a little bit easier. Airflow tends to go through the path of least resistance, right? Like, it's kind of like water. It's kind of like shit falling from the sky. It's going to take the path of least resistance, which on an intercooler like this is going to be about here. Well, the logo's kind of appropriately placed there. It's going to be kind of here. It's not, given the distance, which it looks to be about 2 inches or so from the inlet to the face of the core, it's not really going to have enough time to disperse and go up top. And of course, that's also going to be a problem with these intercoolers too. Anything we do to make this guy better is indirectly or directly going to probably make these guys better, but still that they're not going to measure up. Perhaps if the in tank were taller and tapered, you know, a little bit less, well, maybe a little bit more sharply, but, you know, tapered up there, or you put it taller and put an air divider that directs half of the airflow towards the top of the core, that kind of thing. You could probably slow down some of the turbulence that I'm sure is happening right here, because what you have is you have all the air going right in here. It has no time to move. It hits a wall on here, 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 and here, and here. And then it kind of has to disperse and kind of figure out its way. One of the things Greg did mention or did ask about, and it's a fair question, was how much boost was I running? And I told him I wasn't really running any boost because we don't have enough fuel injector to run a lot of boost. And he was curious how this would measure up when we turn the boost up. Well, we already know on the eBay intercooler, you turn the boost up to 12 pounds, it's going to make 7 or 8 pounds, and it's going to taper to about 6 out the top. Like I've got data logs to prove that. I'm not going to pull those up right now, but if somebody really wants to see them, I've got logs. I promise I'm not making this up. This is not an assault. This is an assault on eBay intercoolers. I've always hated them. No, actually, that's a lie. I've hated them for the past year and a half since we tested them. Before that, I thought they were kind of like everybody else. I thought they were a great budget option for sub 500 horsepower. But a year and a half ago when we did the Volvo test, I've kind of been on the warpath against them since then. And based on numbers that I've seen from other people's cars that have these intercoolers, I feel like I'm justified in my whatever rampage, whatever you want to call it, against these things. You know, I almost would say you're better off at low boost without having an intercooler than running an eBay intercooler, based on what we've learned here, based on what I've seen on the Volvo stuff. Of course, that's my opinion, backed by some amount of scientific data, not, you know, exhaustive studies, but y'all be honest, y'all aren't testing this any better than me. So we're just going to put that one out there. I do think if we can come up with a better in-tank design, all of these intercoolers will honestly work better. Because at the end of the day, you do want to distribute the airflow as evenly as possible across the core, A, to get the maximum cooling effect, and B, to get the maximum amount of airflow. And if you look at the way the intercooler in-tanks are designed for my intercooler over here, you know, they come in, they don't come in straight, they come in at an angle. I think this is an old Skyline intercooler. They come in at an angle. They got a long, you know, pretty good distance here, almost the width of a cold boy there, cold snack, across. And it has time to kind of deflect and move a little bit. Now, it's entirely possible that those in tanks could probably be better designed as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that these are the pinnacle of intercooler design or anything like that. That's not what this whole test was about. Like I said before, I thought this was a test of intercooler cores, and I was completely convinced this thing was going to dominate this thing, and it didn't. but I feel like I got to put the data out there for discussion, especially. Now I'm changing my opinion. This is what happens when you test things and you measure things and you apply the scientific method. Is sometimes you realize or discover that your ideas are wrong, and you get to go back and you get to improve them or change them or figure out what was up, and you get to go make horsepower. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the name of the game. We're here to make horsepower.